Our guest, Sir David Brewer, is the chairman of the China-Britain Business Council. It's an organisation devoted to business and trade. He's also a guest at the Asian Financial Forum 2010 here in Hong Kong, and he joins us from London. Sir David, thanks very much. And looking at the CBBC, can I ask you, first of all, what does it do?
Well, the China-Britain Business Council, which has been going in various forms for 50 years, is the organisation which promotes all UK trade with China, inwards and outwards. We get involved in exports, investment in China, and now increasingly with people coming to invest in the UK. And in fact, China is the only country to which our Trade Ministry and Foreign Office, through its UK Trade and Industry arm, subcontracts the business of promoting trade with that country.
Now, looking really to Asia, would you say, Sir David, that Asia is becoming the place that a lot of business eyes are shifting to because of the downfall, perhaps, in the developed countries, the downfall in their economic systems?
I certainly think that the centre of meltdown is, with the meltdown, the centre of gravity of financial services and trade generally is moving eastwards. Through our offices in China, we're finding an increased number of companies wanting to do business with China. Possibly they be companies who've done business in other parts of the world, found markets falling away. Where do they look? They look to China. Companies who've already been in China for some time, they're asking our offices and the offices there of the British Embassy and the consulates, where else can we go in China to expand our business?
Now, Sir David, back in November 2008, you, and I quote, said, "China will provide the foundation upon which future economic growth is built." Now, is that the way that you feel today? I mean, for example, would you say that China has really got the leverage to pull the world up from recession in the same way as the United States did in the past?
Well, I think going back to the beginning of the crisis, China was the first country to make major move in terms of fiscal stimulus. I've been to China a couple of times in the last 2 months, going the area around Nanjing, and also to the EU-China Business Summit, which took place also in Nanjing. And wherever I go along motorways, I find bridges being built over the motorways for more roads or railways, and particularly now everybody talking about the high-speed rail network, which is building up so strongly. It's not long before China's going to have the world's biggest network of high-speed rail. You'll be able to get in 4 hours from Beijing to Shanghai, for instance. And therefore, I believe that the fiscal stimulus, which China, because of its economic and political situation, could put into action more quickly than some other countries. They didn't have to worry so much about interest rates or rates of exchange, and therefore I do see it being hugely important. Now, whether it can bring the whole world out of recession, it's quite a big thing to ask. But I think in terms of their own area, the fact that the export markets have dropped away in Europe and in the United States, and therefore the production now is being stimulated for domestic consumption in China. And when Wen Jiabao came across here at the beginning of the year for the annual UK-China summit between the two premiers, he did talk to me about the healthcare system which has been introduced in China. Up till now, probably the people in the countryside have had to save even more income than somewhere else in the big cities, because if a member of their family became ill, they would have had to go to the cities for medicine and for medical attention. And of course, they keep money for such an eventuality. But therefore, if that can be taken off, and that particular expense is not hanging over them any longer, gradually, perhaps their saving percentage will go down a bit, and they will be able to become consumers gradually. It won't happen overnight, but I do believe it's happening gradually.
Now, Sir David, talking about your visits to China, you've been there over 100 times, and you mentioned health as being one opportunity. What are the others that you see out there in the years to come?
The UK has tried to identify particular areas of opportunity for UK companies. And in fact, I took part with the Mayor of Nanjing in his annual EU Economic Summit in September, and we looked at areas where we can cooperate with him. And in fact, that goes back to a report which CBBC, with the help of United Kingdom Trade and Investment, commissioned towards the end of last year. We looked for other large cities than the major conurbations like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou and Hong Kong. Because people were asking us, where else can we invest in China? Or people coming in were saying, so many people are in the very big cities, where else can we go? And we found that there were 270 cities with over 1 million inhabitants. And from that, we identified 35 cities where we thought that their ambitions, their target areas for investment and for technology transfer matched up with particularly SMEs in the United Kingdom. I'm thinking of creative industries there, using the design, using the computer, animation, computer games, ICT, meditech, biotech, such as you find around the universities and industrial parks, automotive components, and of course financial and professional services.
And looking at that study of 35 cities, where does Hong Kong particularly sit?
Hong Kong is already above that. Hong Kong is in the Premier League, and it's one of the ones like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou and Hong Kong. Those are the ones that people are already so well aware of, established in, of course, growing in, but they are above the, what I call this new survey that we did, the 35 additional cities. It would be wrong to call them second-tier cities because they're too big for that. They are other large cities. But Hong Kong is there with Beijing and Shanghai, way above that, and people still, of course, from the UK, use Hong Kong very much as their base point for doing business with China. It's a very good place to live, education, you have the rule of law there, communications are very good, and for a business person who's going in and out of various cities in China, where else and where better to be based? It is the leading financial center in the region. It is certainly has all the international connections. We know how well the Shanghai Stock Exchange has been doing in terms of listings in the last 2 years. 3 of the largest Chinese banks gained huge amounts of liquidity through the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And of course, we trade those shares in London. I think the listing these days is almost really something in cyberspace, and therefore our financial people here in London are happy to be trading shares in London which actually are listed in Hong Kong. So I do see huge opportunities.
So, Sir David, looking rather more broadly at the picture in China, how would you see this balance being played between what you'd call investment in exports and then the development of the consumer markets?
They've got to do the two, but I don't think they're going to find that the domestic consumption can totally make up for the lost exports, the lost manufactured exports. And I think, therefore, that China also now is happy that it's moving up the technological chain, that surely if one wants something made very cheaply now, somebody might go to Vietnam and get a rock-bottom price there, and that would be well done on other companies in countries come forwards. But I think for China to move up the manufacturing chain and to have more added value like that is something the Chinese government will be happy about.
So, David, this is the first time you're visiting the Asian Financial Forum. So how would you see your organisation actually contributing to it, and what will be the takeaway that you'll have?
Well, I think at that stage I turn myself, rather than from one of the panelists, the speaker, to actually a member of the audience, and seeing the very distinguished and interesting group of speakers, of participants coming from across China, all around, I look forward to learning much more about the opportunities and other people's views of what can be done, and then bringing that back to the CBBC, although through our offices in Beijing, throughout China, through our offices in the UK, which will be spread around. But through the CBBC's network, we want to be able to tell British companies what the opportunities are in Hong Kong as a gateway into China, and then going into direct to provinces and countries and companies themselves. So I think I shall be learning from what's going on around me at that time.
Thanks very much, Sir David. Sir David Brewer, our speaker at the Asian Financial Forum 2010.